He's going to make a run inside. Block him. That a boy.
3 wide behind them.
You got him, Mikey. You got him, man. You got him. Come on, man. Come on, baby. Come on. Get him in the fold. Get him in the 3 cars out. Oh!
Big trouble. Big wreck behind them.
Beat him back. Come on.
To the flag.
Come on, Mikey. You got it, man. You got it. You got it. You got it. You got it.
This shot right here was meant to be one of NASCAR's greatest moments. 2 teammates racing towards the finish, Michael Waltrip getting his first win in 463 tries, and his older brother Darrell calling it from the booth. But just hours later, Michael Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt Incorporated, and the entire NASCAR world would be left silent. On this day, 20 years ago, in 2001, was the day we lost a legend. It's the day that we lost Dale Earnhardt. 20 years later, in 2021, fans still talk about Dale. Fans still respect him, and fans still miss him. But we also look back on how he changed NASCAR, how he changed the safety, how NASCAR was different back then compared to what it is now. And for some people, Dale changed their perspective on NASCAR, especially for me. He changed my whole perspective on NASCAR. And I'm going to tell you the story of how he did it and when he did it in his own way and in my own way. So here it is. This is how Dale Earnhardt changed my entire perspective on NASCAR. To get into that story, we have to go all the way back to 2006, when I was only 6, turning 7 years old. So basically, growing up, I was a huge Disney fan, and to be honest, I'm 21 years old now. I'm still a Disney fan. I mean, who's not a Disney fan? I mean, obviously, childhood sticks with you forever. So that was when Pixar released Cars, and my father, he, being a former mechanic, he still does a little, side jobs at home when he works on cars and all that junk. So I said, why don't we see Cars? Why don't we see the movie? So go to the theater, and I sat down for an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours, however long the movie is, and I watched the movie, and I fell in love with it. I mean, you got Lightning McQueen, Mater, Doc, Chick, the King, and it was amazing. As we were leaving, my dad told me that the King is actually based off a real person. I said, who's the King? He said, it's the King. And I said, but how can the King be the King? He said, the King is actually Richard Petty. And I said, who's Richard Petty? He said, Richard Petty is the king of NASCAR. He's the best NASCAR driver there ever was, or there ever is. So he says, why don't we watch a NASCAR race sometime? And I said, okay, let's do it. So I think it was in 2007, probably mid-2007. I don't know which race it was. It was a NASCAR race on. My dad tells me, he's like, let's watch it together. I watch it, maybe, how long is it? Maybe 12 laps into it. Nothing was going on. It was single file racing. It wasn't Daytona or Talladega or anything, I can tell you that. It was a shorter track. I don't know if it was Kansas or if it was Charlotte, Texas. I don't remember. But it was one of the shorter tracks. But, an intermediate. But honestly, I don't know. And I said to my dad, I said, Dad, I'm sorry, but I just don't like this. I said, I'm just not interested. And back then at that age, I was into the Thomas the Tank Engine. I was into trains more than I was into cars. I knew more about trains than I did with cars compared to what I know today. Now I'm 21. I know more about cars than I did with trains. I also had a huge obsession with the Titanic and stuff, and so I was interested with more of that stuff than I did with NASCAR. My dad, being the person he is, he respected my opinion, and after that, I didn't watch a NASCAR race. 2008 comes. My family and I were on vacation in Daytona, not for the 500, not for a race. We were just there for a vacation because my grandparents, before they passed away, way before they passed away, well, actually, my grandmother passed away 3 years prior. My grandfather was living down there, and my great aunt was living down there as well. They were about maybe 5-10 minutes drive from the racetrack. So we're on vacation, and we have the Daytona 500s in town. Well, NASCAR's in town for the 500. And obviously, can't get tickets the day before the 500. It was for what I found out, like, a couple years later, it was the 50th running. Everybody's going to be there for that race. So we just drove past the track, spent the day with my grandpa, went down to the beach, had a fun day. The day following the 500, we go to the racetrack. I still wasn't a NASCAR fan. My dad wanted to show me the best track on the NASCAR schedule. At the time for the 500, somebody made a sand sculpture depicting NASCAR's 60 years in existence and 50 years of the Daytona 500. So it was a sand sculpture. I think it had, from what I saw, it had Jeff Gordon in it. It had Richard Petty. I think it had Red Byron in it because he was NASCAR's first champion. I think they also included Bill France. And think that's all I can remember. There was one more person, but I'll get back to that. We go into Daytona, USA, the museum. Walking around, I see Ryan Newman's car. From what I found out years later, it was Ryan Newman's car sitting there in the victory lane stand. We go on a tour of the racetrack and all from the grandstands. We didn't go on the track itself. We were just in the grandstands looking around. We grabbed a bite to eat from the little cafe they had there, or if it was like just a snack stand. I don't remember what it was, but we got lunch. We went into the racing simulator thing that they had there. I don't know if it's still there today, but it was a simulator. My dad and I get into it. We take turns driving. I remember when I was driving it, basically I crashed and the freaking simulator cage, it just shook and I jolted. I didn't realize I was scared because I didn't expect the simulator to jolt like that. So we got out after that. As we're leaving, my dad, he pointed out there was a statue standing out there of a man holding a trophy. And he's like, look at that. I'm like, who is that? And me, because the only NASCAR driver I knew at the time was Richard Petty from watching Cars. I'm like, is that Richard Petty, Dad? He's like, no. He's like, that's Dale Earnhardt. I'm like, who's Dale Earnhardt? And he's like, aside from Petty, one of the best NASCAR drivers to ever live. We're walking back to the car. We walk right past the sand sculpture that I mentioned before. And I look at the other man that was in the sand sculpture, and I look at the statue of Dale. And I'm like, is that Dale Earnhardt as well? And he's like, yep, that's Dale Earnhardt. So they also included Dale Earnhardt in the sand sculpture. So, we got back to our car, went back to the hotel, and I think we went home the day following. But that was 2008. Flash forward 2 years later, I'm 10 going on 11 years old. I'm in 5th grade. I'm in a flea market with my mom. We're just walking around and seeing what the people had for sale. And I come across a vendor who was selling sports stuff. I thought maybe he would have some stuff from the Disney Cars movie that he would sell, because I was collecting the little die cast that they had at the time. And I don't see anything with that, but I do see a binder, like a school binder where you would put your papers and all that junk in. So I'm looking and I'm like, I've seen this guy before, the guy on the cover. I'm like, and I asked the guy, I'm like, who is this guy on the binder? He's like, that's Dale Earnhardt. I'm like, he must have been big if he had his own binder. Me being 10 years old, I didn't realize that there was more to NASCAR merchandising. So I asked him, how much is it? He was like, he really wanted to get rid of it because he had no need for it. He only sold it to me for $8 actually, and I actually had exactly $8 in my pocket, so I bought it. And I walked back and my mom's like, why'd you buy that? I'm like, because it looks nice. I mean, it was a pretty cool looking binder. I mean, the picture, it was Dale standing there with his glasses, with his arms crossed like this, and he was just looking out into the garage area, because you can tell by, if you looked at his sunglasses in the picture, there was his car and the reflection on his sunglasses with people standing around it. So I bought it and I took it to school. I was putting my stuff in it, like my papers, my homework. And me being 10 years old, I got into YouTube. I was watching videos almost every single day, like I still do now with YouTube. And I type in Dale Earnhardt's name. First thing that popped up was Dale Earnhardt's fatal crash. I'm like, what does fatal mean? I didn't know what the word fatal meant at the time. And I clicked it and I see the comments saying it's a shame that he died. I'm like, he died in this? I'm like, how can he die in a crash like that? I'm like, that didn't even look like a bad wreck. And I looked at other crashes that were popping up as like recommended videos and stuff. One video I remember seeing was, what was it? Can't remember, but it was another crash prior to it, and it wasn't even that bad. I'm like, how did he die in this? I didn't know Dale had the basilar skull fracture. I didn't know he broke his neck in the crash at the time. I'm like, there's no way he could have died in that. I'm like, he must have died like hours later. He must have died the day following. But I later found out it was from the skull fracture. And I'm like, wow, that's terrible. Like, how can he die from that? And basically, I started looking more into his crash, and I was fascinated with just how safety changed, how it happened like that, and just how other crashes looked so different compared to Dale's. Other people walked away from theirs, but he couldn't walk away from his. I didn't know about the full face. I didn't know about the open face helmet he wore. I didn't know he didn't want. I didn't know about him refusing to wear the Hans device. But the year following, 2011, I was 11 years old, and Daytona's coming around. My dad says, I know you don't like NASCAR, but do you want to watch the Daytona 500 with me? And I said, no, thank you. And I come downstairs to get my pajamas so I can go to bed, because I had a bedtime. Obviously, you're 11 years old, you still had a bedtime. So I was coming down to get my pajamas, and I look at my TV, and my dad's watching a race. And I see cars pushing each other. I'm like, what's this? He's like, this is NASCAR. I'm like, what race is it? He's like, it's the Budweiser shootout. And all I see is, I see 2 cars pushing on the top, 2 cars pushing on the bottom, 2 cars pushing in the middle. Later, I found out that was tandem drafting. So I'm like, maybe I'll give it another try. Maybe I'll watch NASCAR again. And after that, I think it was the next week, the Daytona 500 was on. I found out that they were doing the lap 3 salute for Dale Earnhardt. And just like every other NASCAR fan, I too, when lap 3 came, held the 3 fingers up, and I looked to the sky, and I did this. I looked up, and I went like that. I remember it like it was yesterday. I mean, it was 10 years ago. That was the first NASCAR race I ever watched. And it was because of Dale Earnhardt. I mean, me personally, I never saw him race. I was only a year old when he passed away. I was a baby. Never saw him raced. Never saw him alive. I only saw him through video and pictures. So basically, that one race, the 2011 Daytona 500, my dad may have persuaded me to watch it, but the real person who got me into NASCAR, Dale Earnhardt. So after the Daytona 500 ended, I'm like, this is amazing. Like, they were pushing each other. They were drafting each other. All those crashes. The winner doing a burnout after the finish of the race. I'm like, I gotta watch the next race. The next race was Phoenix. And I watched it. Jeff Gordon won. And then they had that huge wreck on the backstretch. Trevor Bayne, who won the 500 the week prior, he wrecked. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm like, how did I say no to this? How did I say no to watching NASCAR? And then I stick out the entire 2011 season. I move on to 2012. And then 2013 and 14 and so on. And I'm watching NASCAR. I'm learning more about NASCAR every day, collecting more diecast, and I'm like, this is amazing. I put all my Thomas the Tank Engine and Titanic obsession behind me, and I pushed NASCAR forward, and it became my main priority in my life. I mean, until years later when I get married and I have kids, like maybe 5-10 years from now, I don't know. But at the moment, NASCAR is my main priority. But let's see. 3 years ago today, in 2018, I was at the Daytona 500 with my dad. I returned to Daytona. It was my first time back in Daytona since 2008. It was the last time I saw my grandfather alive before he passed away in 2009. I drove past his house, went onto the beach, did the exact same thing I did in 2008, except I went to the 500. I went to the race itself with my dad and my brother. My dad's not that big of a NASCAR fan. He used to be. My brother's not a NASCAR fan whatsoever, but I was. 2018, I was a die-hard NASCAR fan. I was living the dream in the Daytona 500, watching it right there. Row 5, start-finish line. Seeing those cars thundering by, going into turn 1, 2, 3, 4 wide. It was breathtaking. It was invigorating, exhilarating. It was just, oh my God, just unbelievably amazing. That final lap comes, and the wreck happens on the backstretch. Eric Almirola goes into the wall. And basically, coming out of turn 4, I rise to my feet just like the thousands of other fans in the stands. And I see the car coming out of turn 4, and all of a sudden I went like this. My hands went straight up. My fists were clenched. I was screaming. I was cheering. And I see that car shoot across the start-finish line. I look over at the scoring pylon, and what's the number I see? The number 3. The number 3 was at the top of the scoring pylon. I was there. Seeing the car coming out of turn 4 and onto the front stretch to do that burnout, seeing him sliding across that infield grass and doing that burnout just like Dale did in 98, I was screaming, cheering like a real NASCAR fan should. And to be honest, I started crying. I honestly started to cry. Not because I was upset that Almirola wrecked, not because there was a crash in the final lap, but that number 3 was winning a race, doing a burnout, and going to victory lane right in front of me. That number, the number 3, the number that belonged to the driver that inspired me, Dale Earnhardt, to become a NASCAR fan, was winning a race right there in front of me. I said to myself, I would never see that number win. I would never see that number on track. But I got my wish. My wish that I always wanted, but I knew I would never see, came true. And to be honest, I don't think I'll ever see that in my lifetime again. No matter how many NASCAR races I go to, I don't think I'll ever see the number 3 one again in person. I mean, Austin Dillon won Texas last year. He won his dual race this year. But me personally, I don't think he'll win a race when I'm in person in the grandstand again. He'll win races in the future, but that's probably going to be when I'm watching on TV. So I'm just happy I was actually there watching that race. And it was just all because of 10-year-old me, 11-year-old me watching a NASCAR race, holding 3 fingers up for a man I had no idea who he was. Me, years later, doing more research to find out who he was and what he did, to be very knowledgeable of how I am with NASCAR today. And now I'm a diehard NASCAR fan, all because of Dale Earnhardt. And honestly, I didn't think I was going to go this far. I mean, I cracked 1,000 subscribers. I'm making custom diecasts, looking to get a career into NASCAR. I watch NASCAR every single week, extremely knowledgeable with NASCAR, and all because of Dale. All because of Dale. People make fun of me for cheering for a man who is long since passed away, who has been gone for 20 years. They think I'm obsessed with him. I'm not obsessed with him. I'm a loyal fan, just like many of you out there. And basically, to the people who have called me lame and stupid, and basically made fun of me for cheering for a guy who's dead, all I want to say is, screw you. No matter what people say to me regarding Dale Earnhardt, I'm not going to change my opinion about him. I'm not going to change my opinion about NASCAR. I change my own opinion, and that's all that matters. And Dale Earnhardt is the reason why I'm a NASCAR fan. I'll never deny it. I'll never change the reason why. All because of Dale Earnhardt. And it's pretty much all I gotta say. 20 years seems like an eternity. 20 years ago, we were all silenced. Well, 20 years ago, the whole NASCAR world was silenced. 10 years ago, I, maybe like other people out there, became a NASCAR fan in 2011. And 10 years later, in 2021, we're all here and remembering Dale the way he was and what he did, the way he drove, the way he changed the whole perspective on NASCAR these days, of how he is now remembered for just his change on safety. Because that crash, it just shaped everything. NASCAR's become safer. It's changed a lot. The cars have changed. The speeds have been different. The safety's been different. We haven't lost a single driver in 20 years because of Dale Earnhardt. But now, all I want to say right now, before I wrap this up, I want to say thank you to Dale Earnhardt. Dale, I want to say thank you for everything you've done for NASCAR, everything you've done for safety, and most of all, thank you for inspiring me to become a NASCAR fan, and for changing my whole perspective on NASCAR. Even though you've long since passed away, I owe it all to you. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even be making this video right now. Thanks, Dale, and Godspeed. Anyway, guys, NASCAR Nick here. I'm going to sign off. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.